rodeo.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and you have tuned into the Rebel News live stream on this, a Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. Now, normally, I co-host the live stream with the sensational she-devil with a sword. I'm talking about the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta, Sheila Gunn Reid. Clearly, that is not the case today. I am with a fantastic replacement, I must say, and it is high energy Andrew Says. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing good. I feel like I'm keeping my social distance from you. I should move in a bit closer here. I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me. It's my first time on the new platforms, on the Rumbles, on the Odysseys, because you see the YouTube warning. We're so sick of that stuff. We're so sick of YouTube. We want you guys to watch on our other platforms, so welcome. Rumble's doing a great job. David Menzies, how have you been?
I've been great, and I must say, Alex and Mocha and myself, we went to Montreal on the weekend to do coverage of various assignments, and I got to tell you, Andrew, even though you weren't there, you were very much in our minds and our hearts. All weekend long, we were doing high-energy Andrew Says impressions. And I have to say, Alex was the best. He mastered, that thing you do with your eyelids going down at half-mast. I can't do that. My eyes are either open or closed, and when I'm doing all the driving, I don't want them to close. And he got your tone just so perfect. I wish we recorded some. We could share it to the audience. But, when you do that condescending, gosh darn it, Dave Menzies, don't you know you're supposed to come in earlier? We're trying to do a show. Gosh darn you, that kind of thing. It was really great, and thumbs up to Alex for the best high-energy Andrew Says impression.
See, the thing about this that David Menzies doesn't know or refuses to acknowledge is that when he's not there, we're all saying, we don't understand what this impression means. It doesn't actually seem like Andrew. It's just his impression for everything. So everybody's just going to start doing that impression back to you just because it doesn't make any sense.
Now, listen, don't get upset, Andrew, because this is a badge of honor.
Is it?
Yes, I have always said you only annoy the ones you love. And perfect case today, Thursday, May 4th. Some people call it May the 4th be with you. Lady Menzoid, who hates Star Wars, but was born on May the 4th. It's kind of like me, born on April 20th, and I can't stand marijuana. Like, folks, what are the odds, right? But it is her birthday today, and I just want to say happy birthday to her. And as proof in the pudding that you only annoy the ones you love, what I went out, see, for several months now, whenever she's done something really good, I say to her, good girl. And it drives her insane, right? She even texts me the F-bomb sometimes, I hate to report. And I don't understand why.
Surely she'll love this story.
But exactly. And you know what? I was at a store and I saw a perfume and it was called Good Girl, which to my chagrin at checkout, I think was $170. But I didn't want to look like a cheapskate in front of the other people and put it back on the shelf. So I bought her the Good Girl perfume. To make put an ending on this story, like I said, you only annoy the ones you love. The fact that there was a high-end perfume with that name, it made perfect sense to give it to her, even though she hates when I say good girl. So happy birthday, Lady Menzoid.
There's literally hundreds of hours of me out there. I implore anyone to find me talking like this. But I can only imagine that the point of this story is actually that you're going to buy me some sort of cologne that says like high energy or something.
Do you know, I came across something the other day. It's for males and females, 2 different types. It is a Rebel cologne. You know, it smells like freedom and victory.
A true Rebel cologne would be for all 66 genders. Let's jump into some of that Montreal protest footage. A lot of people are estimating somewhere in the ballpark of 100,000 people.
Yes.
So to be safe, you can say 50 to 100,000. Now, a lot of people always say, how come people don't say the real number? How come they don't say? It's because when you don't know the actual number and you have to estimate, you can't just be throwing out, oh, there's 10 quadrillion people there. So what you do is people who are experienced in seeing how many people are in a gathering, you compare it to a football stadium, you compare it to an arena, something like that. And then people measure how long the actual parade or protest goes in kilometers, how many people fit in that. That's how people estimate it.
That's right.
So you can't just come up with these crazy things. But most people are saying about 100,000 people, David Menzies. You were there. Alex was there, Mocha was there, Yankee was there, Shirley doing impressions of me the entire time. So
We were.
What a sad state of affairs.
And I can tell you this, folks, because, you know, those on the left like to say, well, a couple of thousand,
Yes.
right? I'm surprised they didn't say a few dozen.
People gathered.
Exactly, but to your point about the length of the line, I believe it was reported approximately 2 kilometers
Yeah.
long, and this was a boulevard, both sides closed off the traffic, so it was jam-packed. Mocha ran ahead and just ran the camera recording the passers-by. I think it was towards 100,000. Another reason I say that, back in the days when the Blue Jays used to play baseball here in Toronto and into a packed Sky Dome, and I think you could get about 52,000 in then. I remember seeing crowds of that sellout crowd coming out of the stadium, and this in Montreal was far greater. It was indeed, to me, 2 packed Sky Domes worth of people. So there you have it.
You want to have an argument about why it's not called the Sky Dome anymore?
Oh, what do you mean?
What's it called now?
Oh, I will not say it. This is something, folks, that cost, it was supposed to be, I believe, 150 million. The off-the-lot price was, I believe, 650 million. And, you know, when it opened in 1989, and then in 2004, Rogers Communications bought the only piece of Toronto real estate that depreciated by 95% over the course of 15 years. For 25 millions, Rogers bought the Sky Dome, and just to stick it in their eyes, they immediately put up their ugly logo on the stadium, and it's now called the Rogers Centre or the
Sky Dome was also a brand name, David. You saw it on all the food vendors in the stadium. It's just a brand name that they decided to go with.
And
Why do you have brand allegiance to the Sky Dome?
No, it was, remember, there was a significant portion of that stadium that was funded by the taxpayer. How does a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate like Rogers come in and get to buy something at, you know, a nickel on the dollar? It's outrageous, and I will never call it the Rogers Centre. I will always call it Sky Dome, and whatever. And by the way, if anyone out there wants to, here's my trivia question for the day. What was the name of the Sky Dome mascot, and what kind of animal was it?
I don't know that one.
No?
I'm going to go with turtle because of the...
It was a turtle.
Was it?
Yeah, and what was his name?
I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll say it at the end of the show.
I just guessed that because of the shape of the dome there. So
Wow.
you're mad at the people who brokered the deal with Rogers is who your real beef is.
Well, it's outrageous. How could you as a taxpayer not be upset by that? You know,
I didn't pay taxes in Toronto.
I don't like the idea, folks, of corporate welfare, especially going to corporations that are extremely profitable. We're paying for that. So yes, High Energy Andrew says, I will never refer to the Rogers Centre
What about the
as
Air
the
Canada
Rogers
Centre? Do you want it to be the Air Canada Centre and not the Scotiabank Centre?
You know what? Yeah, they keep changing the names all the time on me.
It's just the original name. It changes with the sponsorship.
I'm just going to call it Maple Leaf Gardens. What do you think about that?
It's a different building. Justin, do we have this clip from Montreal already? We can talk. These are the things that we can argue about. We need a show
And we
together
will.
or something. We will. Let's show some of the great action that happened in the biggest protest in Canada, probably at least in the last year, for sure.
Yep.
How do you think the Montreal police is going to interact with this mass demonstration today?
I hope they will respect the crowd, but I'm not sure because, as you know, they're very aggressive in brackets. But I'm saying to people, if you have a ticket, just do like me, contest it. All these tickets are illegal and unconstitutional. You don't have to pay it. Go and see your lawyer and contest it, and you will win because we just need one person in court to win, and after that we'll have a case law. So I hope that they will respect us today, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see together what will happen.
And I think you're right. I think the vast majority, if not all of them, are going to be thrown out, Mr. Bernier. But what does that say of our political leaders, our bureaucrats, the health bureaucrats, the police even? It seems that we're in a Canada where they're espousing fear and intimidation tactics. They're making you think you're breaking the law when you're really just embracing the Constitution. What do you have to say about that kind of governance that we're enduring right now?
That's a tyranny. That's not governing, respecting the rule of law, respecting our constitution. And these politicians will have to be in front of their population, maybe this fall at the next general election. And I believe that people will remember that. They will remember who was there with them to fight against these draconian measures that they are imposing on us. And at the end, we're not breaking the law. We are only here to just say to people, we are in a free country and we want to stay in a free country.
Yeah, you wear the mask, but what about wearing masks long term? Why can't someone actually come forth and say the consequences of wearing masks for long periods of time? What about the contamination that we could spread even more bacteria and viruses with the breeding ground of there's basically wearing a mask. It's like a process, right? There's a humidity could actually be humidity on a mask, under a mask, is a breeding ground for bacteria. Okay, so somebody cannot tell me that that's not true, right? And then after the bacteria and viruses accumulate, then we could spread that around. So
you got to look at the prevention before it happened. A lot of people are taking medication that's screwing up their immune systems. The way they're treating them in the long care facilities. It's only now that they're making better decisions, getting better equipment, getting things going in these long-term facilities. Because my wife told me that when COVID hit, they were saying there's not enough equipment for all the orderlies. You got 6 pairs of gloves. You were putting infected people with non-infected. There was nothing. So about a year ago, you look at today, it's like night and day. Now what you said about, is it worse? Now, like you said, the measures are there implemented. Yes, it is. My kid is suffering from anxiety in school since they've been mandatory wearing the masks. My work, I work for the city of Montreal. I'm obliged to wear a mask all the time. I'm getting headaches. You're seeing people's psychological health. That's something we don't take in consideration. You look at people's liberty, the way the police officers are taking their measures out of way. They're supposed to serve us. I'm telling you, this is one thing that we got to understand, that we live in a democracy. And in a democracy, we have rules and we have laws to protect the citizen. I know we're in a pandemic, but can we use science for once? Can we stop using fear tactics? Science is what put people on the moon, for God's sake. This is what we have to do. Stop basing it on fear and quick reaction and basing it on science. That's what I'm asking.
It's time that we stop letting these politicians say that Quebec is divided with Alberta. Quebec's divided with the rest of the West. We're not all divided. When I flew across this country, this last time, I didn't see no border lines. I flew straight across Canada. I never saw a line saying this was Manitoba, this was Ontario. There's no borders. Why are they blocking it? And it says right in your Canadian passport. It's a sad thing that you got to carry your Canadian passport in your own country. Just because on the opening page of it, it says the Minister of Foreign Affairs duly asks that you cover your oath to protect the bearer of this document to travel forth between provinces, between borders, unimpeded and unhindered. And that when at times to give protection and security to that bearer of this document. I had to use that.
Well, folks, I'm with Mike Baer of Free Speech Media, and a very interesting thing happened to Mike on the way to Montreal yesterday night. And what happened when you crossed the Ontario-Quebec border?
Well, we were stopped arbitrarily. They took our colleague Alan Calder, pulled him out of the vehicle, had him on the ground, kneeled on his back, arrested him.
But why? Why?
Well, apparently you have to submit your ID even if you're not a driver. They took my ID. They didn't issue me a ticket. They turned us around and escorted us back out of the province with 5 Quebec police cars.
This is the Quebec Provincial Police?
Well, I think it was actually the Montreal police.
The Montreal Police?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, strangely enough, they were far outside of their jurisdiction. We were like almost an hour outside of Montreal. Like we were just at the border of Ontario. Well, not the border, the boundary of Ontario and Quebec.
And so then, Mike, instead of going all the way back to Toronto, you just stayed overnight in Ontario, and then you got to come in today, Saturday. Like, why wasn't there a blockade today? What, is the virus over now?
We came through Gatineau, and there was no problem. There was no, we weren't stopped, and everything was fine. And we came out to Montreal.
You know, Mike, to me this speaks of the insanity. This is all ostensibly being done in the name of public safety to stop infections. But so if you go one route, you're stopped. If you go another route, you're not stopped. Myself and my crew, we came by air. So apparently the Wuhan virus doesn't mind if you fly into another province. It just cares if you drive it. Mike, does this make sense to you?
It didn't, and they were only stopping drivers with Ontario plates, that, as far as I could see. So it just, none of this makes any sense.
Well, folks, I'm with Guy. Well, Andrew, so much to digest there. What are your impressions of some of the streeters at this incredible demonstration?
Well, first I want to mention a youthful Maxime Bernier out there with looking edgy with his polo, possibly some Vanderbilt jeans I mentioned to you during there. Fun fact for the viewers, Gloria Vanderbilt of Vanderbilt Jeans, Anderson Cooper's mother. So if you've ever wondered, Anderson Cooper is literally a billionaire in his family. Vanderbilt School, the railroad. His family literally owns the railroad. That's how nice. That's how old it goes back. But what I wrote down was, it's very nice to see this many people coming out for this, but I want to know if there was a goal for the protest. Did it end up at the legislature to demand end to the lockdown or the curfew? Are they going to all go out during the curfew? So it's all nice to come out during the day and nobody's getting arrested, even though a few people did, of course. But what exactly is this going to do? Is what I want to know.
The legislature, I believe, is in Quebec City, so that would be one heck of a hike.
You've got to do something. You've got to have some sort of demands.
No, but I think clearly those were numbers too big for Premier Francois Legault to ignore. And but what I found a fascinating angle about this, folks, and I was there, so I saw it firsthand. We got there before the protest. We stayed a couple of hours after the protest, after the march had finished. And it's this. This was not one of these mostly peaceful protests. This was more than 100% peaceful. It was actually downright festive. There were people marching and playing musical instruments. There were families there with children. So there were no shenanigans. And yet, if you go to the Montreal Gazette, because I wanted to see how the mainstream media was going to cover this, they led with, I'm paraphrasing now, I wish I brought in the actual article, but it was essentially what began as a peaceful protest ended in violence with people throwing rocks, setting off fireworks, according to the Montreal Police Service. I can tell you, folks, that must have happened hours and hours and hours after the protest and the march ended. Because we were there, like I said, at least for a couple of hours after it had ended, and it was just people gathering around, some were openly drinking beer in the street, big deal. But there was absolutely no violence. There weren't even harsh language being used. And what got me thinking about this, Andrew, is a deliberate conflating of two different protests, because that very same day, because it was May Day, May the 1st, at Jerry Park, where the Montreal Expos used to play once upon a time, there was a so-called Anti-Capitalism March. And it was attended by the usual scholars, the Black Bloc, Antifa, Marxists. And one of the ways in which they demonstrated their dislike for capitalism was they went to the nearby businesses and smashed their windows in, despite the Montreal police saying, "Oh, pretty please, won't you stop doing that, please?" And that's kind of funny too, because the Montreal police kind of like to get violent with the low-hanging fruit, which is to say those people who aren't violent and who aren't fighting back. And what I think, Andrew, is that given the timeline, I think some of those anarchists made their way over to Olympic Stadium where this protest took place, and they did the shenanigans there of throwing rocks and setting off fireworks. But that was never explained in the Montreal Gazette piece. I wonder why. And the other thing was CBC, their headline was demonstrators, most of them maskless. Ooh, no, you don't say, maskless outside, right? Converged near Olympic Stadium. And their theme was that the authorities had to move the vaccination clinic from Olympic Stadium because there were worries and fears that the protesters were going to disrupt the vaccination clinic. That is absolutely false, fake news. There was nobody there, as the Bruce Springsteen song likes to go, wearing trouble on their shirt, They had no intention of going there and disrupting any kind of vaccination clinic. These people are described as anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers. No, it's about choice. You want to wear a mask? Go for it. You want to get a vaccination? Go for it. They kind of embrace the slogan of the left when it comes to the abortion issue. My body, my choice. Funny how that's out of vogue now. Now it's my body. You better get the jab. You better mask up. And you better apply for the vaccination passport, because that determines the amount of freedom you're going to get. So I was actually sickened and appalled by the deliberate falsehoods that were being spread by the mainstream media. It's just astonishing, Andrew, when we saw so many protests in the United States last year in light of the George Floyd incident, when you literally saw anchors with burning buildings in the background, ducking because of a Molotov cocktail coming inbound, calling it a peaceful protest. And here's something, like I said, beyond peaceful, downright festive, and they lead with violence. They lead with, we had to move that vaccination clinic because, these crazies were going to disrupt things. It sickens me, and it just further demonstrates that the media, it's no longer impartial. It no longer calls it see it like an umpire. There is an agenda. There is a specified narrative at play here, folks, and it's appalling.
Wait till you let the Montreal Gazette know that the masks don't actually do anything to stop the virus. That's another conversation for another day to get censored upon. SaveArter.com is a website that we've launched. For lack of better explanation, to save Arthur himself. Why? Because who knew that in 2021 it would be the year of arresting the pastor, jailing the pastor, him, Pastor Coates. This is all in Is it all in Alberta, or are we going Ontario too? Nonetheless, we've gotten to a point where religious liberty doesn't exist, and I see comments from people saying, well, they're the only ones not following the rules, which is not true. There's tons of churches that people may not know about that are either haven't been caught meeting in secret, meeting in a different place. So they're not the only ones. But it tells me that when you're saying just follow the rules, you can make up your own mind because you think that all laws are equal or everything is just, and you're not allowed to disagree with it just because it's turned into law. That would be like saying hate speech laws you're in favor of just because they're laws. And then it also flies in the face of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, of course. And as a non-religious person, I still find it terrible that they're arresting and shutting down religious services.
And you know, Andrew,
For your safety, David.
Well, this is it. It's all based on science, isn't it? But I remember folks going back last May to the Church of God in Elmer, Ontario, which the government did try to get an injunction to shut them down this weekend. The judge didn't buy it, although I believe Trinity Bible Chapel in Waterloo, an injunction was served on them to close down their chapel. We'll be covering that story in the days ahead. But what was so perverse when it comes to these decisions are science-driven? At the time, Church of God was having, it was basically a drive-in sermon, like you'd go to a drive-in movie. Families were contained in their vehicles, windows up. They had a radio frequency that you put on your stereo to listen to Pastor Hildebrandt give his sermon. And yet the police were there taking photos, videos, there was a drone. And yet, no word of a lie, folks, about 3 football fields away, some 300 meters from the Church of God, is a no frills. And man, they were packing them in and there was a lineup to get in. How in the world is the science written that if you are going shopping into a big box store or supermarket, the Wuhan virus won't affect you? It realizes you need your provisions. And by the way, I'm not saying shut down the stores, even big box stores or supermarkets. I want economic liberty for all businesses. But how is it that it's okay to go into a big box or a supermarket, and yet it's not okay to sit in a vehicle with other members of your family listening to a sermon? 0.0% of any kind of infectious transmission, and yet that's where the police and of course the local media vilified the Church of God and the Hildebrandts for daring to carry out a religious sermon in completely hygienic sanitary standards in terms of the virus. It's despicable, Andrew.
They have to close the vents like the movie The Happening, or else with Mark Wahlberg, or else the virus will seep through. Now, Justin, can we throw up the website while we talk about this? SaveArthur.com. I think you can type in Save Arthur if you're not fond of the Polish spelling, I guess. But
and I do believe we have some video.
Oh, do we?
Yes, we do.
Oh, do we?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, though, if you're one of these people complaining that they should be following all the rules, well, there's an argument there of not all rules are created equal. And then there's the argument of state your science. If you want to go ahead and believe all these terrible premiers that have popped up and Justin Trudeau's government, that they're doing the right thing and they're saving lives, then state your science. If there's so many places that are open that shouldn't be, it should be very easy to track people transmitting the virus through these avenues. It should be very easy to track case numbers from certain areas, a spike in cases in a town where it's a small town in a lot of these places and they've got a few hundred people going to a church. It should be easy to track a big influx of cases. And then I guess the counter argument to that would be what? They're not going to the hospital? Well, then it must not be that big of a problem. The whole thing falls apart when you actually have to follow a logical strain of thought. And then at the very end of it, David, it's a virus that has a 99.97 survival rate for those under 70. So there's the charitable donation you can go through, which is through the Democracy Fund. We don't have any contact with that money. Or if you would like, you can donate straight to us, but donating to the charity gets you the tax receipt. What's the footage you want to serve up here, like a nice movie trailer?
Before we get to that, I just want to say this, Andrew, that when you say state your science, that's the thing, though, we've learned in the past year, isn't it? Science, like gender, is fluid all of a sudden. I'm not making this up, folks. When a week ago Saturday, Maxime Bernier and Randy Hillier went to an anti-lockdown protest in Peterborough, Ontario, and when they were exiting, they were both given $1,550 tickets for basically practicing their freedom of speech in a public park, Confederation Park. And yet, last summer, there was an even bigger gathering in that very same city, in that very same park, for Black Lives Matter. And not only did the police turn a blind eye, oh, no. They actually took part in the protest, including Police Chief Gilbert Scott. They bent the knee.
Is that
with
the same guy who was there?
Same guy with the bicycle helmet
on. You know
on.
who he reminds me of is the cop from Trailer Park Boys. Just getting into Ricky's face or something.
So again, Andrew, explain to me, is the science such that if you are a Black Lives Matter protester, well, the virus is all about racial injustice. It'll leave you alone at one of those demonstrations, but it hates the anti-lockdown people, and it will infect them, and that will become a super spreader event. So that's why the police have to suddenly give out these outrageous fines. It's a joke.
Well,
it's an absolute joke.
I'm just getting an update here, David. Everyone from that protest is now dead.
Well, that would include me, and so maybe I'm a ghost.
You're undead. Can we get to this clip? Let's save that for Halloween, David. I'm sure you're going to come.
No, Halloween's been canceled.
Why they're not here? This is such a hypocrisy that they have been hunting me for months to walk in. Well, it's open. Walk in and inspect if that's what you want. Where are they? I talked to the lawyers and we said, okay, fine. Let them inspect the facility if that's what they want to really do. But it's proving my point that there was never about inspecting the facility. This was about shutting us down. That's the purpose. And they couldn't shut us down today because was too many people. It proves my point from the very beginning that they're not interested in health and checking if the facility meets their standards. They're interested in destroying Christianity in this country.
They hate freedom. They hate everything that is just and holy. That's why they're here. But we're not going to give more attention to the hyenas. We eat hyenas for breakfast. We are a pack of lions. And lions never bow before.
I just want to do the right thing. And the right thing is usually the hardest thing to do.
I'm not the most religious person on earth. I'm here to support the freedom to do that. And that's what it's all about for me.
We are pro-Bible, we are pro-Jesus, and thank you, God, for Pastor Art Pawlowski, who is standing up, who is the best leader, the best pastor, true Christians.
Right, this virus is real. It's no joke. But we're all supposed to carry that burden, everyone. The government, unfortunately, has stopped us from doing that.
So thank you, Art, for your courage. Thank everybody here for exercising your charter freedoms. Keep on doing it. And remember that it's better to die standing than to live on your knees.
People has to go to the point that they wanna die rather than be on the knees and be slave.
Is this not what we thirst for? Laughter, family, coming together, worshiping our God, freedom. Look, those people are not slaves, they're free.
Hey guys, this is extremely important. Rebel News is going to keep fighting to bring you the other side of the story, but it's only a matter of time before YouTube shuts us down entirely. So I need you to go to rebelnews.com now and sign up to make sure you don't miss out on any of the action. Adam Sos for Rebel News here outside of the Church of Pastor Art Pawlowski, where he is proceeding with worship despite Alberta Health Services and the Calgary Police receiving a special warrant which allows them to arrest him in the middle of worship. Most of you have probably been following this case, but for those who aren't familiar, Pastor Art's encounters with police started a couple of years back when he was arrested for publicly reading the Bible. Apparently that's a great sin. Now, it continued on and on as he continued his service. One of his primary ministries is serving people on the streets, going to the streets and feeding them, helping people find jobs, helping them get back on their feet. So that's one of his primary ministries. He's received multiple tickets and fines for that activity, as well as for continuing to congregate with his parishioners at his church in violation of the 15% restrictions of capacity set in place by the government of Alberta and Alberta Health Services. Now, this all culminated in the Holy Saturday video of Pastor Art screaming, "Get out, get out," at this very location, at this very church.
Out! Out! Out of this property, you Nazis! Out! Out! Gestapo is not allowed here. Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed. Out! Do you understand English? Get out of this property.
You might have thought after all that.
International superstar.
Oh, that will never get old, Andrew. And I love the look on the face of, I think it was Alberta Health Services, that woman. She is stunned. It's like Bambi looking into the high beams of a Hummer going 100 clicks an hour. She's clearly never been spoken to in such a fashion, being told to get out. And yet again, one of these unaccountable, non-elected public health officials that are dictating policy to everyone else. And you know what is appalling about that too, is that as if the idea that Pastor Art would ever be violent, why was there something like a half dozen police officers fully armed in there as well? Does anyone possibly think anyone with Alberta Health Services was going to be physically harmed? I mean, yeah, they had their feelings hurt, but that's no reason to show up with 3 police cruisers full of cops.
They tell them to do that so that they can intimidate people into stopping. It's the same thing they do in Montreal. 55 cops show up because they have nothing better to do, and they want to prevent you from doing it in the future.
Yeah.
Terribly unsafe of those officers in the Alberta Health. They were not socially distanced.
Yep.
And I hardly believe that they were tested that day, David Menzies. So therefore, they're in violation of their own laws. But of course, when you're conducting police activity, you do not have to abide by the rules. For some reason, those rules remain unknown to me as to why they're allowed to break the rules. If we are saving people's lives and we are preventing death, we should be following the rules at all times.
Oh, well, Andrew, I think one thing the last year and a bit has shown us clearly, without a doubt, that the phrase, "we're all in this together," is so much BS. And really what the correct phrase is, "one rule for thee, one rule for me." It is a complete double standard. But one thing we must focus on, Adam said something very significant in his report there. The harassment of Pastor Art began a couple of years ago, not months ago, folks, when he was simply preaching the gospel in public. So in other words,
feeding homeless people, I think, is what they had a problem with.
Well, nevertheless, the date line we're talking about is 2019. This is pre-COVID. So there was clearly an agenda against this individual that had nothing to do with the virus, health and safety, sanitation, hygiene, whatever you want to say. And now they're just, I think, using the Wuhan virus to double down on the harassment of this pastor.
Well, look what they've done. They've gone and made him famous. And one rule for me, one rule for thee, just so happens to be one of your catchphrases. So
yeah,
it's good how that works out, David Menzies.
And never forget that in the lunchroom when the food order comes in, because I'm very particular.
We need to get that on.
Why is every time I talk about the lunchroom, Mr. Producer gives me this look.
There's a lot of requests for David Menzies shirts. I think there should be.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, I think there should be a rule for me and not for thee shirt. People want to buy the same hat that you have, your 1930s investigative reporter hat, possibly with the press slip in it. And also, we've had this idea floating around of there's a T-shirt or a design out there of a bat signal, but it's Trump's face. So we want that as a David Menzies with the hat. Because when people have a story, they better call Ghostbusters.
I love
David
that.
Menzies.
By the way, I supported the local Montreal economy by buying 3 new hats, and can't wait to bring them out as part of my spring ensemble.
I thought you were going to say like 3 baguettes, a Joe Louis, a poutine, a Pepsi and the poutine. Eh? You want the Pepsi? You want the baguette?
I got to avoid all the sugar in the Pepsi, and poutine I was never into. But one last thing about Pastor Art.
Okay.
And I think this, and I've made this point before. When and I've been covering these anti-lockdown protests for more than a year now, folks. I think the very first one was in April 26th of last year. So we're past the 1-year mark in terms of the Toronto ones. And that is the most passionate people I get on camera, the most vociferous demonstrators are those from the former Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc nations, that used to be under the lockdown of communism, not COVID. And they know how this movie plays out, and it's not a happy ending. They see how certain rights and freedoms get taken away, all in the name of some crisis. It might be national security, it might be, as we have right now, a virus. And they can smell a rat far better, I think, Andrew, than the millions of Canadians who have grown up and lived in our land of milk and honey and are, I think, tuned out to what the real threat of this virus is, which is an attack on our civil liberties and our freedoms.
A lot of Croatians, a lot of Ukrainians, and people of that ilk, Serbians, and
Hungarians.
Milk and honey. Shout out to Purple Woods. I think that's actually maple syrup. Anyways, I wanted to throw to a nice Avi video that I believe came out sometime during Australian hours last night. Australia time is when we're sleeping. I think they're 13 hours ahead. It doesn't matter, we're all on a flat earth anyways. So
that means Avi is sleeping right now.
Ideally, he would be sleeping, but who knows? With that hair, you can tell how much
What are you saying?
I'm saying that you can tell how much sleep he's got by his hair. It's like a clock on its own. So he's talking about how Australian passports seem to be invalid these days because people in the government, I believe, are suggesting that Australians be jailed for trying to come home. So let's go ahead and play that clip, Justin.
This passport used to be more valuable than any other passport in the world. But this week, at the hands not of a foreign power but our own, it's suddenly worthless. If you've ever opened up your passport to the front page, it requests, and have a read yourself, I quote, "Allow the bearer an Australian citizen to pass freely without let or hindrance and to afford him or her every assistance and protection of which he or she may stand in need. There's no conditions attached to this declaration in the name of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. There's certainly no mention of, unless you've been to India lately. And I reckon we can be pretty sure that when it says pass freely, it includes letting the holder of the passport back home, especially in a time that he or she is likely in need of assistance and protection, maybe even from coronavirus. So how the heck does the Australian government believe that they have the power to make it illegal, threatening massive fines and even jail for any fellow Aussie who dares to use this document to return home? I'll tell you how. It's because of those of you who allowed them to trample on our fundamental human rights for the past 14 months. This didn't happen overnight. You let the state and federal government strip us of everything. You allowed the media to scare you into believing that all of this was for our own good. But today, the mainstream media and their collaborators are suddenly declaring this Indian ban as a return of the White Australia policy, which is laughable because their hero just next door imposed the exact same ban on New Zealand citizens only a month ago.
I'm announcing that we are temporarily suspending entry into New Zealand for travellers from India.
Why have you all been so quiet about Jacinda Ardern? Is your hero a white supremacist or a racist for it? Of course not. Her policies throughout this pandemic have been shocking, authoritarian and undemocratic, but not bigoted. So let's be clear, it's a horrific policy, not a racist one, just a disgraceful one. Just as outrageous as when Daniel Andrews stopped Victorians from being able to return home from their holidays in New South Wales during their outbreak in January.
What that means is that nobody who's from those parts of Sydney, Greater Sydney, or have visited that part of Greater Sydney will be allowed to travel back to Melbourne or any part of Victoria.
The point is, consistency matters. Suppose you stand for human rights, especially of your own citizens. In that case, you must stand for it unconditionally, always. No matter what side of politics is trampling on it or when it suddenly matters to the mainstream media. If you agree that this...
Of course, if you want to get more of Avi, go to YemeniReports.com. and sign up for his mailing list. I've got a Canadian passport here, David Menzies.
And it's not yours, right?
It's not mine. It's producer Efron's.
Jeez.
I can confirm he's a Canadian citizen. And it says in here, David, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada requests, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, all those whom it may concern, to allow the bearer to pass freely without delay or hindrance, and to afford the bearer such assistance and protection as may be necessary. That simple line there is being infringed upon at our provincial borders, David Menzies, where we have seen video of people not from Ontario being turned away, and what do? They can't actually enforce it through the law. So what they do is they say, if you go further, we're going to ticket you against the Emergency Act or the Reopening Act of Ontario. Okay, what happens if we just take the ticket? Can we come into Ontario? No, then we're going to charge you with obstructing a police officer in their investigation. So they literally have a blanket crime they can charge you with just to prevent you from exercising your own rights. Will that actually hold up in court, David Menzies? Probably not. I'm no lawyer, but probably not. So it's the same thing that they do around here with the tickets. It's all deterrent.
Yeah.
Will it hold up in court? We will have to wait and see, because the courts in Ontario are so bad and closed for the most part that it takes so long to get anything through. And it's so sad that, I wonder what would happen if you just showed a person your passport if an Ontario police officer would be willing to just literally go against what's in a Canadian's passport.
Well, that's the thing, Andrew. I'm no lawyer either, but I can tell you a few days ago, I attended a press conference by Rocco Galati representing 19 police officers, 15 active, 4 retired. And those 15 active folks, make no mistake, they are putting their careers on the line. They can be disciplined to the point of being fired. And basically, they're doing a constitutional challenge of all these crazy lockdown rules. It's increase in police powers. But one thing that came up in the press conference, to your point, about these provincial borders, Rocco said, and I believe him, this is not a thing. We've never had checkpoints at borders. When you drive out of Ontario to Manitoba in the west, Quebec in the east, you don't come across a gate and a bridge and a roadblock and, your papers, please, like you're going into the United States. And so part of his challenge, Andrew, is that there really are no provincial borders in the sense that they are international borders. It is a different standard. And I think he's right. And it's kind of interesting. I have to go back to Montreal a week Wednesday. I can't believe I'm saying this, to get my fingerprints and my mugshots done by the Montreal Police Service. It goes back to the houseboat incident, folks, when I allegedly assaulted a police officer. Please dig up that video and see for yourself the lie behind that allegation. But that's how they roll at the Montreal Police Service. Ezra once typed in Montreal Police Service corruption. He expected 500 hits on Google. He got 2.5 million Google hits. Amazing. But I'm wondering, maybe I should drive instead of flying into Montreal, Andrew, because if the border guards at the Montreal-Quebec border see my Ontario plate and tell me I am persona non grata coming into Quebec, if I say, but wait a minute, I have to be there tomorrow morning at the police station at 9 a.m. and I was told that if I'm not, there'll be a countrywide warrant issued for my arrest.
Sure, there will.
So what's going to happen? Will my processing take precedence over this fake border closure, or will they say not our problem? And then, of course, the next day when I miss my fingerprinting and mugshot appointment, I guess some police agency arrests me for not coming into a province to get this done, in which their very police turn me back. I think that would be a heck of a story to see how that plays out.
They're going to send Dog the Bounty Hunter after you? Mace him, Leland, mace him! But they're following the same plan as Australia, which is kind of why I wanted to show the Avi video, because this is what they did in Australia. First it was the lockdowns, then they moved to the inter-regional checkpoint, which right now is provincial. Don't kid yourself that they want to move towards inter-regional checkpoints. Maybe it's the region of Durham to the Greater Toronto area, or Peel region, et cetera, to stop the spread of the virus, which they can't prove has spread across these lines. They always say, oh, it's people coming in from other provinces, says Doug Ford, because he doesn't want to be blamed to it. blamed for it. They can't prove any of this stuff, but that's the roadmap that they use, the interprovincial and then interregional checkpoints. And then they say you can't go outside 5 kilometers of your house more than 1 hour, and you can't go outside for more than 1 hour a day except for to exercise. Oh, you're using that exercise to wear a protest sign like the gentleman did in Australia. Oh, that's also illegal now.
Yeah. Or remember, there's an asterisk. If you have a dog, 24/7 access to walking around.
You can walk your dog and such. But so the rules shrink and they tighten depending on how people are going to allow them, how much resistance they're going to get. As you can see in Montreal, they have no problem saying we can't let you in the province, or we're going to put our curfew to 8 p.m. and then we're going to be your friend and put it to 9:30 p.m. because, you know, what's the logic there? Either people go out after dark and they're gathering or something and they're spreading the virus, or they're not. You can't, the difference of an hour and a half doesn't do anything. In fact, you're funneling people into an area in a tighter span of time. So now they're doing this thing in Alberta, but they're only doing it in the hotspot regions, David Menzies, which happens to be Calgary, Edmonton, Abbotsford, Lethbridge, so basically all like the 20 biggest places in Alberta. These are now going to have a curfew, and I believe Jason Kenney is supposed to have a press conference today about how communist he wishes to go. And I don't want to have to talk about these things and call things communist and stuff. 2 years ago I would have never done that because I think it's hyperbolic. But now we get to the point where the media and the government gets to collude together and decide what's best for everybody without voting. I mean, it's ridiculous. What's the board of doctors in Ontario that says we should be locked down through the rest of the summer?
Would that be the Ontario Medical Association?
The one who makes all the predictions for Doug Ford, that when he's not eating cheesecake, he listens to. And now, and so to your point of earlier of non-elected officials, we have to listen to these people who no one can see, no one knows the names of. We've never elected them. And then when questioned about it, the politicians don't actually have to answer. They just refer to these doctors that you can't stop from doing anything. And if you want an example of the government not knowing what it's doing and not being able to answer questions because they never have to, point to Legault on, I believe it was the CTV show. Is it Power something? Either way, he was on a CTV show and he couldn't answer any of the questions. He couldn't answer anything, even though he's got his screen full of notes, which is what they do in Parliament now. They look at the screen and they have the notes in front of them. Even though he's got his notes on a screen in front of him, he can't answer any questions. Why? Because Justin Trudeau, Legault, Doug Ford, they're not used to having to answer any questions. Yep. Their logic and their rules fall apart as soon as any questions are asked. This is why they don't allow people in the room. This is why they pre-screen all their calls and they don't let places like us ask some questions. Because if they get asked any tough questions, and he probably went on there thinking he'd be so friendly treated so friendly, let's say, if that's a word, that he wasn't expecting actual tough questions that he wasn't prepared for. He's got his list of things that he wants to say, and most of the time they've even got it word for word, just like we saw in Parliament the other day, where he calls somebody anti-abortion in response to an anti-lockdown question. He's got his pre-written thing that they've already got ready to say. So if you guys care about what the politicians have to say at all, or if you want to have them answer any questions, ask them in public. Don't attack them. Don't assault anyone. Don't do anything illegal. Don't even look threatening. Ask it from 20 feet away if you have to. But the politicians don't have to answer any questions. And there's no journalists out there willing to do it, besides people like us, or besides people from True North, for example, in Canada. They're not willing to ask them any questions. So kudos to this guy from CTV News. I think it's power in politics.
That's it, yes. And when you ask them questions, I mean, I'm thinking of late last month, Andrew, and I did a piece on this, folks, because we are listening, we are watching. Dr. Samantha Hill, the president of the Ontario Medical Association, was on CP24, and she said, I'm paraphrasing, but this I've got the correct tone of her narrative. For all those skeptics out there, those COVID skeptics that you don't believe that the hospitals are overflowing, that the IC units are at a crisis point, just reach out and book a tour, right, of these facilities. Yeah. So I reached out to the Ontario Medical Association. I spoke to her media relations person, and well, lo and behold, what did I hear, Andrew? oh, well, Dr. Hill wasn't really, she was just speaking personally. Excuse me, speaking personally? On live TV with an audience of presumably tens of thousands of people. And then I was told, Dr. Hill says you should contact the individual hospitals instead. So I reached out to Sunnybrook because that was the hospital Dr. Hill was focusing on and has now put in a field hospital in the parking lot, which I visited last week. And by the way, I was told, folks, that there's only one virus patient in that entire field hospital.
Oh, that's good.
At least that was the case last week. And I reached out to the media relations people of Sunnybrook, and they said, we have no idea why she would say that. And no, you're not getting any tour of this hospital. We're in this big, pandemic crisis situation. So I'm getting a little sick and tired of the bullshit going around. When some talking head like Dr. Hill puts out a invite on live TV and says, for all you skeptics, go to the hospital, see for yourselves, and then, well, I didn't really mean that. How would you like to be on the operating table with that doctor?
It's like North Korea, but at least they let you go in there and take a tour. It's just it's their curated tour where they let you only see what they want. No, that's the thing. And about this hospital, you can see it. It's all the crappy military tents that they've. It takes if you've got a good team, it'll take you, for what you see there, an hour to set up. Yep. And they probably move a bunch of equipment out there that shouldn't be outside, so you're potentially damaging it. So what I'm saying is it costs them very, very little to actually set up this field hospital. And what do they get? Probably tens of millions of dollars for this. At least a couple $1 million from Doug Ford. And I said this before and I'll say it again. The reason Doug Ford is giving money to all these hospital unions and giving all this relief money for the schools, even though they're not open, is because these are the people that were against him when he got elected. Him and Stephen Lecce said, too bad to the school board. We're not making your class sizes cut in half. We're not hiring more teachers. And he said, we're cutting stuff from the hospitals. Even though the hospitals were in dire straits before, he made these enemies before. And now he's got this blank check to hand out to hospital after hospital after hospital. You can check back just by Googling of how many hospitals have gotten increased budgets, despite laying off nurses, despite having record low numbers because they're not accepting cancer patients, screenings and stuff like that. Giving them millions upon millions of dollars, and now they're saying, oh, we need to keep opening field hospitals. Oh, we need to give more money to the schools. Oh, we need to have more online learning. Yeah. And now they're saying to close all the borders. like it doesn't make any sense. They're just writing checks to people to stay in power. They're just making more friends so that they can stay in power when the time comes, and they've shown themselves to not actually be conservative leadership. I don't care what you want to call yourselves, just do what you said you're going to do, which is not what Doug Ford can actually do. Nobody in the Ford administration wants to speak out. His family members don't want to speak out. They all want to sit behind Twitter. They all want to sit in the DMs of other people and say, oh, we're against this. Oh, we can't believe what he's doing. Oh, we don't want to be kicked out. We don't want to be kicked out of the caucus. And they all have excuses. They all have excuses not to come on the shows, David Menzies. They have all excuses not to come out in public. I emailed the mayor of Hamilton to ask him why his vaccine program is racist, because they say that only people of racialized backgrounds can get the vaccine. They said, oh, we don't want to come on the show to talk about that. Oh, how about a statement? How about a statement for the logic behind it? Oh, we can't give a statement on that. Mayor of Peterborough, who says Randy Hillier and all the people there should go stay the F home and all this other stuff. Yeah. Oh, Mayor of Peterborough, would you like to come give your side of the story on Rebel News? Oh, we can't answer that. Nope. They can't answer simple questions. They're just not smart. It's gotten to that point where you have to tell them they're just not that intelligent. People in these elected positions, they're just not smart enough to answer questions, and that's what it comes down to. If they're smarter, they'd be in different jobs.
Well, Andrew, clearly with the example of Hamilton, this is the left painting themselves into a corner. What's their statement going to be? Yeah, back in the 80s, we were really against apartheid in South Africa, but now there's kind of uses for apartheid when it comes to vaccinations. And by the way, I want to speak to, you raised the issue of teachers unions and, the Ford government reaching out. Talk about a waste of time. Not a day goes by, Andrew, when I don't hear a radio ad. And it almost sounds like these cheesy B-movie trailer ads where, in a world where one man, Doug Ford, becomes the terminator of our children's health, right? It's like, you will never, ever, even the Liberal government, the McGuinty-Wynne government, which was supposed to be the most pro-teachers union administration ever in the province's history, even the teachers unions turned on them. You cannot please the Marxists running the Ontario teachers unions. So there's no sense even trying. Just don't bend the knee to these people. And by the way, if I was a teacher, I'd be saying, why are my union dues going to this funding of COVID fear and intimidation tactics? Why are you broadcasting all this rubbish that our children are so at risk when we know, Andrew, by the stats, the death toll stats, that children are virtually invulnerable to this virus?
If you open any newspaper with a lot of ads or like a Go Train magazine with a lot of ads, you'll see PSA after PSA from teachers unions. They even enlist children's groups to say how terrible the Ford government was. This is before Corona and everything. See how terrible the Ford government is and how they don't care about children. And we need to cut class sizes in half. All their complaints right now are the same as when Ford was elected because they just want more money. The teachers are lazy. I can't mix the words anymore, David. They're lazy. They were back to work for what, less than a month? And we need March break here, you guys. We need March break to, get our jimmies back together.
That's
and we need to refocus our resources here, you guys. They just don't want to work, you guys. They don't take any pay cuts. Neither does anyone in the government. They just don't want to actually do anything. And when it comes to answering questions, they can't do it either, David Menzies. I'm sorry.
You're 100% right, Andrew. I remember reading, I think it was a Toronto Star story about teachers are stressed to the breaking point. I go, they just got back. What, a couple of weeks?
Sitting there while the children play video games on Zoom is really stressful.
Oh,
I think we've run out of time.
We have. We've run out of time. We've run out of racetrack. So I want to say thank you to the man behind the board, Justin, the super producer. Thank you so much, High Energy Andrew says, for filling in for Sheila Gunn-Reid. And thank you to everyone that tuned in. And you got something else to say?
I think Justin wants to cut to. We have a feed of a press conference. Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford, a special Star Wars press conference, I think is happening right now. So thanks for you all for watching. Go to fightthefines.com. Continue to support our work there. Use the Democracy Fund if you want a tax receipt. And of course, sign up for our email list so you can not miss any more live streams. I'm sorry I was so animated today, David Menzies. I'll go back to this version, David
there
Menzies.
You go. There's Andrew Says Classic.
Can we cut to the video, Justin? Thank you.
And in
order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society.
So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.